Hello everyone, Heath Robinson here, and I am so excited to be hosting John Barclay again. It's always better with John Barclay. Before we
Well,
begin,
thanks, folks, for showing up today. I appreciate it. As I look out there, there's creeping up towards 1,000 people joining in again today. So thanks for taking some time today. I'm going to do my best to make it worth your while to be here again today. Thank you to Heath and the great team at Topaz for having me back yet again. This is actually the 21st time we're doing this together, which kind of blows my mind. It's a lot of fun, though. Okay, so what are we going to cover today, and kind of what are the philosophical ideas? I feel like I need to do this each time because I'm sure there's new people joining in. Excuse me. My job, as I see it today, is to give you some ideas to inspire your creativity with the great tools that the folks at Topaz are making. Not necessarily to make perfect finished pictures. We don't have enough time to really do that. So I try to pick examples each time that might be somewhat redundant, but drilling home key concepts, and then I try to add some new little tips and tricks, if you will, that'll maybe inspire you to try something beyond what you're doing now. And of course, Glow 2 was announced today, so we'll take just a few minutes on that. You might want to check back in with Joel Wolfson, I believe, next week, and he'll be doing a lot more in-depth examples of how to use Glow in your workflow. But I'll take a little bit of time today to introduce you to the new Glow 2 interface. We'll talk about Adjust again today in black and white, which I always seem to run out of time, so I'm going to do that up front and spend a little more time being more careful with the black and white tool. Clarity and Texture Effects, because I found a cool little thing to do in Texture Effects and I wanted to pass that along. So this is, Lightroom, and you can access all of the tools from Topaz in Lightroom and go there, but what I tend to do is get them set up in Photoshop, because then I can resize them to make them a little bit smaller resolution files, so they'll process a little bit faster and we can move through this more swiftly rather than waiting for the spinning dialog box to get through a big file. All right, so let me get my notes page handy so I can make sure we're covering the things that I wanted to cover today. I always like to make a background layer and duplicate that just so we can turn that on and off and see what we're doing along the way. When I made this photograph out in the Palouse, it wasn't the best of days, but I did like the clouds surrounding this old leaning structure that's out there, pretty iconic area. And I knew that I had some tools, specifically with Topaz, that I could enhance that sky, which is what I imagined it would be. So here's what I would do in an image like this. About 3 different things. The first thing I would do, and this is one of those times where I would go out and use Adjust. Should be able to make that a little bigger here. There we go. I would use Adjust. I'm going to hit the reset button because they are sticky settings, meaning it'll remember what you did the last time. And at this point with Adjust, all I'm going to do is go into the adaptive exposure here on the right side. So you have panels that you can roll open, whether it be global adjustments or local adjustments and so forth. For this particular image, all I wanted to do is use the adaptive exposure in regions. And for those who don't know, that's really the meat and potatoes of this particular piece of software. It's basically like an auto adjust on steroids. So rather than a one click, you can pull this auto exposure over and over and over until it's gaudy, until it makes no sense whatsoever. But the good news is you can, in conjunction with that, choose to say, hey, I want to affect the bright brights and the dark darks. So if I use the region slider and have that to the left, that's what it's going to do. It's only going to grab the dark darks and the light lights. The more I push this region slider over, it's adding more of the tonalities to be able to adjust throughout the image. So the idea is to use some of this adaptive exposure and then decide how much of the tonal range, if you will, do you just want to do those light lights and dark darks, or do you want to do more than that? And that's a personal choice at that point. So here's what's happened, and this is about where I like it. So before like this, after like this. Now, What I'm not a big fan of is what it did to the foreground here in front of the barn. And that's why I also made a layer so in Photoshop I can paint out that adjustment. Most of the other tools, as they update them at Topaz, have great masking capabilities. This does not have that yet. I'm sure that'll come at some point. But that's what I wanted to do here for the first step, was to really try to bring out some of that detail in the sky and do an overall adjustment, and I think Adjust does that pretty well and easily. Okay, so now all I have to do is add a layer mask, and this is not going to be a lesson in layer masking. Some of you may be able to follow this, others may not. But at the bottom in Photoshop, I always call it a front-loading washer icon. If I click that, that allows me to paint with a brush and remove some of that adjustment. So I want to do that right in this area here that it made it a tad too bright. So the point of that, really quickly, and there's plenty of ways, including my website, there's a free demonstration on how to use layers and masks in Photoshop. To me, it's the most important tool to learn as a photographer if you have Photoshop, is the ability to add adjustments where you want them or don't want them. And the ability to use layers and masks in Photoshop is a huge advantage, just like it was there. So if I click this eyeball on and off, you can see that that adjustment did a great job of bringing out the detail that I remember seeing in that sky. We can further adjust that by going into, oops, I got to click on the actual image, not the mask. Going back into Topaz, and let's go into Clarity, where we can further adjust this. I'll make this a little bigger. We can further adjust it. So now let's just kind of slow down and pause for a minute. So Clarity is a tool, much like the Clarity slider in whether it be Lightroom or in Photoshop, where it's really affecting local, what we call local contrast. But believe it or not, as good as that Clarity slider is, it's somewhat of a sledgehammer. And so in the Clarity tool, which is my preference, you have the ability to control micro, low, medium, and high contrast. And if you want to learn what works best for certain images, I would encourage you to go ahead and go to these presets over here and click on them, like landscape, for instance, and then you'll have all of these, and then pay attention to what's happening with the sliders. That's how I learned this software in the beginning. And I've gotten to a point where there are certain presets that I like as starting points. And so I've created a preset and just made that under my presets. And I have John's starting point, and then a medium version of that as well. And I believe on this one I use a medium version of that. And so what that does, and hopefully you can see that, let me just go before, after, and you might be asking the question that typically gets asked when we're talking about these tools: why wouldn't you just use Adjust? Why are you using both? Well, because Adjust is a more of an affected look. It can be, well, let's put it that way, and it can give pretty dramatic over-the-top looks. That's why I used it somewhat gently, knowing that I can do a little finer type of detail enhancement with a tool like Clarity, which is much more gentle and not near as affected, just like it is in Photoshop or Lightroom. But it gives me the ability to make these minor adjustments. This is over to 0.25, 0.14, and then oftentimes you go to the negative side on medium and high contrast. That's because all of these, when you move to right, are adding contrast. Sometimes you add too much contrast and you don't want to do that. So pulling these to the left starts to undo some of that contrast that's happening here. I'll just move this over to the right. I don't know if you can see that. It's somewhat subtle, but the front of the building, in and around these wire pieces over here, it got way too blocked up. So if I pull this down to the left, some of that detail comes back. Hopefully you can see that. There's actually now detail in all of this and in the front of the barn, which was getting somewhat blocked up by pulling these sliders to the right. The other thing, and I'm not spending a lot of time in Clarity today, but I tend to use it in everything I do, so I do want to spend some time on it. And if I'm using it, I want to at least introduce the concepts for those, again, who are new to my webinars. So if you're using this tool, one of the biggest advantages is the tone box here. So this is all well and good that you can do some great adjustments to contrast in a very gentle, elegant way. But anytime you do contrast adjustments, you are going to shift the histogram to the left or the right or both. Okay, so I encourage you to open that histogram up in here. We've blocked it up a little bit on the left side. And if I've done that, I simply come down to the tone levels. The black and the whites are normally all I use. And I'm going to pull this to the right just a little bit until this pulls away from the left side, which it has. So once again, if I look at my histogram and on the left side I've got some data crashing on the left, or on the right side I have data crashing on the right, I can pull it away by moving the black slider or the white slider in the opposite direction. So in this case, I pulled the black to the right by 0.14, and it brought the overall brightness back to where it was when we started. So probably pretty gentle looking to you, but let's look at it again. Here's before, and there's after. To me, it's a significant difference. It might be subtle, but it's those subtle things at this point in the processing that's making a huge difference in the nature of your photographs. One other thing that I like about this program is it has both a clarity section, and even though the tool is called only clarity, it has a hue, saturation, luminosity section, which allows me to work on hues, saturations, or the luminosity values of these particular colors. And in this case, I'd like to bring back some of that green in the grass, so I'm going to knock that up a little bit and make that green get nice and green. There's actually some yellow typically in those areas, so I'm going to bring the yellow up a little bit, and then the orange in the front of the barn, that's going to get to be a little much there, so I'm going to be careful about that. So just to review, add your contrast if you want to use these presets to help you understand what level of clarity you need to add, and think about the clarity tool as like the clarity tool in Lightroom or Photoshop, and that's adding that elegant fine pop to your image, or detail to your image in a gentle way rather than a big robust way. And then check your histogram, make those adjustments with the tone levels, and then if you choose, you can adjust the saturation of colors, the luminosity. Like for instance, if this was a blue sky, oftentimes I would come in, click the luminosity, and I would go to blue, and I would either darken or lighten the sky using that tool. I do it all the time. Okay, so let's do that, and I think I forgot to make an added layer. I'm sure I did. So you know what I'm going to do, just because everything is moving pretty fast, I'm going to undo that really quickly. I'm going to add the other layer because I want to be able to show you what we're doing. Okay, and it's just going to add that right back in again. Okay, now we're back. So let's go backwards here. So let's turn them all off. That's what we started with. Topaz Adjust helped bring out some of that detail in the sky, and now adding clarity added that much more clarity to it, or detail enhancement to it. And also I was able to use the luminosity, or in this case the saturation tool, to bring out some of the saturation in there. That's what I wanted to just show on this particular image, was how I would normally use these tools in my workflow. And in this case, shot an image where I knew that there was enough detail in the sky, and with these tools I would have the ability to enhance it with Adjust, fine-tune it with Clarity. Whoops, sorry about that. So let's move on to the next one. Okay. And this is where I want to spend a little time with some black and white, and also a tool that I've never spoken about, I don't think ever, in a webinar before, and that's Lens Effects, to add a little bit of bokeh feel to this too. So let's get started. So let's just talk philosophically for a minute. Excuse me, get a drink. Again, excuse me for that. Though there's not a whole lot of color in this image, it just begs to be black and white. This is the old silk mill in Lonaconning, Maryland, that's been photographed a lot. And to me, again, it just screams to be black and white. So a really strong piece of advice would be to make your color image the best you can make it before you make that black and white conversion. So I've done all my work in Lightroom on this to the point where I think it looks as good as I can get it in Lightroom. But the first thing I'm going to do is things that we just did before. I'm going to go into Clarity. And I am going to definitely, let me make that a little bigger so we can see it. I'm going to go over to my presets. Oops, my presets there. And I'm going to do my John Start. Oops, I didn't get it, I guess. There we go. And then because it's the start, I'm always going to check that histogram. Oops, I've locked up some of the left side, so I better come over here and open that up just a little bit, because that micro or that contrast work, remember I said it's always going to do something. So now I've brought all that detail back. If you paid attention up front here, when I did that preset of John Start, it added a little bit too dark up in here. So by bringing that histogram tool over and then pulling this over again, it just so happens around 16, 14, it opened that back up again. But look at the difference, before, after. Beautiful, beautiful clarity being brought into that image. And even some of the color pops out a little bit more. Matter of fact, let's just go down here real quickly. Let's go to saturation and go to the overall, because you don't have to do just one color. You can do the overall saturation. I'm going to pump that up a little bit so that, again, in the black and white conversion, it's going to recognize those colors and give me a better chance to get a much stronger conversion in black and white. So let's go ahead and accept that. You know what I did again? See, I go too fast. I didn't, we're going to do this again, because I really do think it's helpful to see each step as we go along. And by having these smaller files that I'm working on, I can go back and change my mistake pretty quickly. Okay, so all I've done now is a clarity step. Now I'm going to do another copy so we can see what happens when we do the black and white conversion. There's not going to be much to do, and that's why I've added one more image to spend a little bit more time on the black and white tool after this one. Okay, so let's make this bigger, even though it's going to spill off the screen a little bit. Let's go back down here and hit reset. So this is how it defaults in. They've done a great job of making all sorts of beautiful looks. Specifically, I tend to like a warm tone in sepia, but just one click and you get a beautiful rendition in, or beautiful conversion rather, in sepia. I'm going to go back here and reset it again. So you have all those presets on the left side. Feel free to try those to your heart's content. And then just please, every time I do a webinar, I say this, just recognize a preset is just that. It's a preset that somebody made back at Topaz. You should then learn what's happening over on the right side and how to further enhance that or change some of the things that they've chosen to make into that preset. Okay, so what do? Well, I normally go through and I click on the filters that are here to see what's happening. And because there's not a lot of color, it makes sense that we're not going to see huge differences, although we are. Some of those brighter areas are definitely getting bright versus this standard, the neutral one way to the right here. So let's just pick one of these. And here's the key that I want to point out to you. When we click on these colored filters here, we have 6 choices just like we did in film days. But look at the dialog box that gets opened. Here's the color filter that is making these particular filters. That's how they're created. This allows you further control. So it allows you to make this even stronger, and it allows you to pull anywhere on the hue spectrum to get the black and white conversion that you're looking to get. That's huge. That's a really, really huge, valuable part of this tool. So not only do you have those 6 buttons to click to see what's going to happen, and these are global adjustments, but you have the ability to further enhance that with the strength slider and then the hue slider to fine tune. And it's going to be much different, and you'll see it in the next image as well. So know that. And then the next thing I would tend to do, so we start with the filters, fine tune that filter there, and then the color sensitivity tab is allowing you to adjust just the colors specifically. So there is some yellow tone, there are some, I should say, yellow tones in there, and I can choose to make those brighter, and I think I will make those a little bit brighter. There's a little bit of red in there from some of that old beautiful wood. You can make some adjustments. Again, not going to see it clearly on this one, so I'm going to leave it at that. The other thing, having just done a little bit of work with Adjust, I just want to bring to your attention that you have the ability to use those same adaptive exposure region sliders that you have in the Adjust tool. They've baked them right into the black and white tool. So the default standard here is set, and now I can choose to use these sliders to further enhance the look or the exposure, if you will, with these adaptive exposures to make it look just the way I want. No other tool on the market has that capability to further fine-tune your black and white images with that great Adjust tool that they have. Okay, and then protect highlights and protect shadow, those are kind of standard tools that you have in other pieces of software. The detail, I would not use that anymore. The detail, I would go back to Clarity because it is so good. If I want to do that subtle enhancement of this at the end, I could do that. Now, just by way of introducing you, I don't think we'll keep it in today's adjustment, but there's some great finishing touches like borders and edge exposures and vignettes and things like that. And there's even some creative effects. One I tend to use a lot because I think it's a neat look is this diffusion. I just think it's a kind of an interesting look, and I'm going to make it not quite so in your face by pulling the softness down a little bit, pulling the diffusion down a little bit. So let's turn that off. There it is off, nice and crispy sharp. Diffusion, we make it look maybe like it's got that glow, a little bit of a glow type of look with the diffusion. Consider that in some of your work, and remember, if you're comfortable and familiar with layers and masks, you could paint that softness of diffusion out in certain areas. And if I were to use diffusion on this, I would do just that. I would maybe paint with a mask all of this detail of the tooled caddy and the glove and the oil can and the hammer and all those things. I would paint that back in as being sharp and leave everything else somewhat soft. I'm not going to do that on this one because I'm going to do something different. So that's a quick introduction to black and white. We'll spend a little bit more time on that in the next image. So let's accept that. Okay, and then make another layer copy. And now, just for fun, let's show you one other thing we can do here. We're going to go down to Lens Effects. And once again, we'll make this a little bigger so we can see what's going on. Okay, so again, all sorts of presets that you have over here, or effects, if you will, with the different groups of the preset. And just because we have only 45 minutes, I'm going to go right down to this vertical transition. And this is one of the bokeh center ones, and it's a tad over the top. So we have the ability to make a change on how much blur. Let's bring that blur down quite a bit. We don't need that much blur on this. Keep coming down here. Now we're getting closer. I'll bring it down even more. You got to remember, when I make my file sizes a little smaller so things will move a little faster, you don't need as much blur. If this was a bigger file, it would demand a fair amount more blur be happening on this amount slider. Bring this over so we can actually see it. So it's probably a little more than I would normally do, but I want you to be able to see it. And with this tool, obviously it's a center focus one. I want to, you can choose, or rather you can choose to how much of the width or the height. So imagine that's making it left to right bigger or top to bottom bigger or smaller. So I can make that focus width from left to right a little bigger. You know, it's just kind of opening up the hole, if you will, of where that's sharp, and I can maybe make the height a little less. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my knowledge of the tools in Photoshop again to show you how easy it is to even fine-tune this a little more. And the transition in this simply says it's kind of going from that sharp area to that bokeh area, the softer area, and making that a nice smooth transition or a hard edge transition. So I'm going to bring it over a little more to smooth that transition out just a little bit more. Now, I don't like necessarily that it's bleeding over to here and bleeding over to my can, so let's take, but I love what's happening up in here though. This is what I was after with this tool, was to focus my eye on the sharp tool caddy and bring in what should appear like a natural bokeh that you shot it with a wider open aperture. So let's go ahead and do that. And now I'm going to throw in a layer mask here. I'm going to hit the letter G for a gradient, and I'm going to bring this up like this and go something like that. Yeah, let's bring it up a little bit more. Gradient there. There, that's getting a little better. And then I can use my masking tool. I can hit the letter B for brush, and I can paint with black, and I can paint just on this oil can. And this is not a lesson in how to paint, but I could actually bring back just the spout. You know, I went over to the edge a little bit. It's not a painting demonstration, obviously, but we're just trying to show you some ideas here of how to use this Lens Effects tool. And I kind of like what that's done. I might spend a little bit more time if this were going to be a final image to reduce, because it doesn't make sense that some of this bokeh is way here in the foreground, obviously, and I would make a lower opacity brush, and I would paint with that so there was some softness there, but not near as much, and make it gradually go out. We don't have time to do all that right now. So from a creative processing standpoint, let's see what we did. We brought in an image from Lightroom where I did all the work I could possibly do, brought it into Clarity and added a little bit more saturation and clarity there, and then we converted it to black and white. And then I used Lens Effects to add a nice bokeh feel. And again, why do you do that? You don't just do it for fun. You do it because you want to draw the eye into the image where you want people to see. Because physiologically, you're going to go to the bright part of an image first, and then you're going to go to the sharp part of an image next. And so if you want to draw attention to that sharp tool caddy with the tools in it, using Lens Effects might be a great choice. Okay, so let's just go back, and this time I don't need to create a duplicate layer because I just want to make sure you can see. Whoops, wrong one. I'm going to slow down again. Sorry, folks. Okay, let's try this again. Let's go to black and white. That's better. Now this type of image would have great tonalities for converting in black and white because it has that great sky. And so once again, I would hit on that red filter, yellow filter, orange filter, and see what they're doing. Come down here and I can push these even more to really bring out that depth. Let's go back and see what red does if I push the red over there. Good, I kind of like what the yellow was doing better. Let's push up the strength on the yellow. Fantastic. And then I can come to my color sensitivity. Actually, you know what, I didn't reset everything. That's why that's happening. Thank you, I forgot to hit the reset button. So let's do that again. Let's go to yellow, and let's push this up. There we go. Now we're making a lot more sense. Now I can roll over in the color sensitivity, and I can go to that blue sky, and I can make that blue sky even darker. I can make the yellows darker or lighter, however I want to do that. Probably not a lot of red in this image, didn't think so. There might be some green, but not a lot. Mostly that blue and the yellow in this image. So once again, the flow of using a black and white tool, the Topaz tool, is to click on these buttons if you want. Remember, though, to go to the color filter and further enhance it by using the strength slider. And then if you want, you can pull this hue to wherever it starts to feel better to you. And that's just personal preference at that point. Once you're done with that, then open up this color sensitivity and work on the specific colors that are in the image. And then if you choose to want to use this adaptive exposure to do more work, you can do that, and you can see the dramatic difference that made in enhancing that. Again, it's a huge valuable tool, and on and on and on. So anyways, that's a little bit better job, I think, of introducing you to the black and white tool, and then all the creative effects, you can go through and play with those at a later date. I want to be able to get on to some other things here. Okay, so let's go to Cuba, and let's just do a couple things quickly by way of kind of review. So I'm going to go fast because you folks are fast learners. I just know it. Going to hit reset, We're going to come into, so I'm in Adjust right now. Adjust has that adaptive exposure and regions, and I want to kind of brighten this up a little bit, not that much. Here, and I want it to affect more of the image than not. So nice, beautiful. It brings out a nice bit of brightness in this image. It was feeling a little dark to me. So let's do that. I didn't make a layer, but that's okay. Now let's just go in, and I think I'm going to want to do, just because it tends to be my workflow, we probably could do this at a later time, but we'll just hit it with clarity. Let's hit reset again. Let's go to my presets. There we are, and on this one we'll do John Start again. Come on. There we go. So let's just show you there's a before, after, adds a nice amount of detail in the road, and the cars start to look a better. It's great. I mean, it's amazing. Oftentimes you're going to see and think your images are looking really killer, and then when you go and use clarity, you're going to go, yeah, maybe not. You're going to realize that they were looking a little flat, as this one was. That looks a little flat to me. Using clarity really makes it pop very quickly. Okay, so we're going to accept what that does. Okay, and now let's have a little bit of fun. Let's go to the new Topaz Glow announced today. So first thing you're going to notice is the interface is completely different. Let's pull this over here. Completely different interface, very much in line with all of the recent releases like Texture Effects and Impression and so forth. You now have that same area to be able to go over here and look at categories or come over here and search. So if you know there's a particular look that you like and you can't remember where the heck it was, you can search for it by the name of that particular look. And you can, if I hit the browse, it's going to keep going through and allowing me to browse more and more and more things, which is nice. And I keep clicking it, and it zooms back to where we were. And then you have all sorts of looks that you can create. But I'm going to go into one that actually is a lot of fun. So let's look. Let's go to liquid color. Check this out. I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty stinking cool. At least on the car. I'm not huge fan of what's going on up here, but look what they've added for us. So before we do that, let's go backwards just a step here. So when I click on liquid color, or I click on Dizzy, right, on these different presets, notice there's a set of sliders here. And that's going to open up, when I click on those set of sliders, just like those other programs like Texture Effects and Impression, that'll open up all of the preset things that are happening, or that have been set, I should say, by the folks back at Topaz. So I can choose to make adjustments to any of these things that they're doing, and you'll start to see those effects pretty quickly, right? So you can choose to do whatever you want with these as a way of fine-tuning the been prepared for you. And again, I'll let others who are planning to talk a lot more about this spend more time. The key one that I want to bring to your attention, what makes Glow start to be a lot of fun and more understandable, are two areas. The opacity slider, so we can dial this back, and if I bring this opacity slider, I'm in the bottom right here, that brings it back to the original image. And then I can feather in that particular look. So maybe here about 50% versus 100% might be what you like. The other thing that's going to make a huge difference is all of these blend modes. So look what happens through all these. Very, very different as I roll through these. Very, very different looks. So normal looks like that. Soft light looks like that. They're a very different look. So play with the blend modes and the opacity slider, and you can start to make it have a very tasteful application of this piece of software rather than an affected application of the software. Nothing wrong with the affected application of this either, by the way. I mean, that's perfectly fine. So let's go back and click on this liquid color. I'm going to bring open the effect panel. So this is how it was created, and I want you to realize, look what they've added. They've added a masking tool. How cool is that? So now you have the ability to mask via a spot tool, which you can then make bigger and smaller by grabbing it just like you can from within Texture Effects, that same tool. Or you can hit color and you can base it on color, or you can base it on luminosity, or you can just use a brush. And in this case, you can make the brush bigger or smaller, and the strength of the brush and so forth, the hardness of the brush, make it harder or softer. And now I can go through and paint all through this image everywhere but the cars and add that really nice look. And once I can use the bracket keys to make this bigger and smaller, so I can come in between these cars a little bit better. And again, if I feel like I've gotten onto the car, I just come down here to the brush and I paint with white, and I paint this back in to make sure that I was totally getting that car. I've got my hardness I need it to be a lot harder here. I got the circle too big, sorry about that. That would work a lot better. You get the idea. So if I liked that glow effect on the cars only, I now have the ability to mask that out with the great masking tool that they have. And it is a great masking tool based on edge awareness. And you can even make this brush color aware beyond that if you want to. So Glow is a fun tool. Let me just go back just for fun. I want to show you a couple of things here. So you've got neon, freaky. I mean, just you want to start having a party and having fun. It's a lot of fun. Let's go to fantasy. These are kind of fun. Fantasy, and I think I found one called Dream. Where's that? So Dream. Isn't that cool? I think that's really cool. Once again, you want to bring that opacity slider down and make it not look so in your face. You can do that, right? So before, after. And then one other one, let's just show you how to do this. So I don't remember which category it's in, so I can go to the top here, I can hit search, and I know it was heavy metal, something or other. So there you go, it brings up heavy metal 1 and heavy metal 2. Now, you might say, what would I do with that? Well, this is where you got to play with the blend modes. So let's see what happens if we go to luminosity. That's what happens when we go to luminosity. So in normal, it has this cool effect, but if I start rolling over a lot of these other ones, and specifically if I go to luminosity and then maybe bring the opacity down a little bit, I can make that effect happen to the car and have these lightning bolts coming off of the car and so forth. And again, you can open this up and start playing with all of the other, oh, I got to turn that mask off. There we go. Oh, that's turning it on again. I'm sorry, I had it off. What was I saying? So you have the ability to fine tune it, and I'm sure Joel will do a better job of going through each of the specific tools here within the panels that are below the presets. But I wanted to at least get you thinking about the tool and how you might apply it, or what it does at least, and give you an introduction, because as of today you can start to save 30% on the tool. I think it's through the month if I remember right. Okay, let me just go here to my notes. How much time do we have? Oh my gosh, we're almost out of time as usual. Let's cancel this and let's go to this last one. I think we can squeeze it in. Excuse me. All right, so what I want to do here is just finish off with probably my favorite tool in a long time is Texture Effects. I just adore this stinking program. It's great. Okay, so it should look very familiar to Glow that we were just in, right? On the right side, you can browse things and search by clicking these three dots, I can hit search, but in this case, I also have tags, and tags mean that I can go by macro, nature, or what have you, right? Whereas if I go to collections, it's based on names like gritty, grunge, ethereal, and so forth. Okay, so if I go to my favorited, which I've started to create a bunch, you'll see various ones, but I just love on this old beach scene this faded look. This just makes my heart sing. Just that easy and just that fast in texture effects. But if I wanted to go one step beyond this, because there is a texture on that, but it's hard to see, once again, I click on the sliders. So there we go, I click on the sliders, and I'm going to tell you again, turn all of these eyeballs off by clicking on them, and that'll allow you to see what's creating this particular look. Now turn them on one at a time. It's showing you what the basic adjustment did, and here's the texture they added, and here's a color overlay that they added, and here's a split tone that they added, and here's a film grain that they added, and here's a basic adjustment that they added. And if you want to throw away any one of those, hit the trash can and get rid of it. And you start to customize this look that was created by somebody at Topaz and start to make it your custom look. And in this case, I want to go ahead and add a more visual texture just for fun to show you what I can do. So I can take everything that they've done for me in the preset, and if I come down to this add adjustment, just below this, I can add another texture. So I bring up the texture box. I'm going to go down to the new flypaper ethereal painterly. They just came out with this. I'm a huge flypaper fan. I'm going to set my, I think I'm going to set this to, let's go to multiply so we can really see it. So I just changed my blend mode. I've done lots of webinars on this phenomenal product, so if you want to get deeper into this, check back on other webinars I've done, and you'll get a lot deeper into texture effects. But you can start to go through these to your heart's content to get a particular look that you want. Let's go down to something like, so we can actually see the texture. Yeah, something like that, pretty gentle and subtle. I can make the opacity of that more or less. So I can bring it up just a little bit. You can bring out the detail of that texture, and just something to recognize right away is when I'm using the detail slider on a texture layer, which I'm in a texture layer right now, it's affecting the detail of that texture, not of the background photograph that you're working on. So I can affect how that texture is looking specifically. And now I've been able to add a little bit more obvious texture if that's what I wanted to do. I really love this just the way it looks. I think it's a tremendous look. Again, in the teaching side of me, though, I want to help you understand that you can alter that effect by adding something else in there. Now, watch this. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this and hit the trash can. So there we go. I get rid of that because I say, yeah, I didn't like it. And I'm going to add another texture layer again, but I was playing and I went into weather. Watch this. Come on, is that not fun? So you have the ability to add like you're shooting through a window. I think this is so cool. I don't know why I get so excited about this, but I really did. So let's do this. I'm going to bring it to soft light and bring those up a little bit, bring that texture opacity up a little bit. And now I'm shooting through drops. There you go. So anyways, that's the little tip and trick, if you will, that I wanted to share with you. Is I've never played these weather ones, and you can add snow to your images and think about the possibilities that you have here with these cool little added filters. But I'm looking at the time here. It's already 5:47. We want to leave some time for questions. Obviously, we've had a ton of information covered here, as I tend to do. The good news is they record these, so you go back and listen again, pull out the information that you want to again, or listen to other people's webinars too and see what they might have to share. So we'll let Heath get back in here and fire up some of the questions we have and see if we can give a little bit more information.
Time flies
Oh
when you're
yeah,
having
share
fun.
screen. Yeah, it's your screen. You can have it, Heath.
Thank you. And if you'd like to follow John, you can follow him at barclayphoto.com. He also has a Facebook page at facebook.com/John Barclay Photo, Instagram at John Barclay Photo, and Twitter at JH Barclay. And as always, if you have any questions, you can contact us at webinars@topazlabs.com or sign up for additional webinars at topazlabs.com/webinars. John, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. And
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always fun to be there. And if anybody has questions and wants to email me after this, I'm happy to receive your emails. And you can sign up for a newsletter on my website, and we can become friends and communicate that way as well. But thanks for coming by today, folks.